For 31 years, the horrific murder of 16-year-old Fawn Cox of Kansas City remained a mystery. The case took many strange twists and turns as investigators struggled to connect the dots. Some arrests were initially made, and everyone was convinced that 3 arrested local teenage gang members were the culprits. However, they were released and all charges were dropped after evidence pointed that they were simply innocent. The Kansas City Police Department was simply poor and did not possess the necessary tools such as efficient DNA testing tools. As a result, and even though they possessed fluids from the crime scene, they only compared blood samples. The case went cold, and the authorities simply had to wait for a new solid lead. Eventually, they managed to solve the case, after they received a major financial and forensic boost in tools. Stay tuned for all the details of the heartbreaking rape and murder of Fawn Cox, and how investigators eventually solved the case 31 years later. In July 1989, 16-year-old Fawn Cox was an average American teenage girl, living an average quiet life. She was friendly and cared greatly about her parents and 2 sisters. She worked as a cashier at Worlds of Fun amusement park in Kansas City, Missouri, and enjoyed living in the laid-back Midwest. Her friends described her as a sweet angel who would never hurt a fly. However, her life was cut short on July 16, 1989, when a thug and criminal made his way into her room on the 2nd floor of her family home while everyone was sleeping. The rapist and murderer strangled Fawn with her little sister's nightgown, then proceeded to sexually assault her in a sadistic manner. Fawn and her family lived in a small 2-story house. Her bedroom was located across the hall from another bedroom that was shared by her 2 other sisters. Her sister's bedroom was located on the side of the house that overlooked an alley. The father and mother slept in the lower floor in a converted dining room. They also had a rather very loud air conditioner hanging from one of their windows. On the miserable day of the crime, one of her sisters was not present at home as she was working as a babysitter in a different location. Additionally, her little sister was not sleeping in her room because it was a very hot night. She was sleeping in the lower level on the couch near her parents. The reason for her move was the air conditioner, which cooled only the lower level of the house. They also owned a dog who was pregnant and also present in the lower floor at the time of the gruesome crime. This meant that Fawn was sleeping alone in her room in the upper level. Additionally, the loud sound of the air conditioner was covering all other noises in the house, and any barking from the dog was presumed to be as a result of her pregnancy. It is not clear when exactly the murderer entered the house. However, since Fawn arrived home after 11 p.m. from her shift at the theme park and headed to bed right away because she had another shift the next morning, and also because her body was found cold, bluish, and stiff in the morning, it is presumed that the crime was committed soon after midnight. The criminal found his way into the house by climbing an orange dump truck that was parked adjacent to the victim's home at night in the alleyway. This gave the thug access to the upper level of the house. He climbed on top of the dump truck and entered the Cox home from the window of Fawn's sister's bedroom. Her sisters were not in their rooms, as one was out babysitting, and the other younger one was sleeping downstairs on the couch near the air conditioner with her parents because it was a very hot night. The fact that it was a hot night meant that the windows upstairs were open, and thus the criminal did not have to break the glass nor forcibly open the window. Once the thug entered the 2 sisters' room, he grabbed the younger sister's nightgown with the obvious intention to use it to strangle and murder Fawn. It is safe to speculate that the murderer would have murdered and raped whoever he found first. Since no one was in the room, the criminal proceeded to Fawn's room. Fawn was asleep when the thug wrapped her sister's nightgown around her neck and strangled her to death. It is very likely that she was awakened by the whole ordeal and put up a fight. The criminal then proceeded to sexually assault Fawn while aware that she was dead from the violent strangling. It was probably his intention from the beginning. This part of the crime should have triggered alarms among the investigators, because whoever entered the Cox home that night was aware of where the girls slept, and that he could enter the home easily by using the dump truck in the alleyway. The criminal was obviously someone who knew not just the location and identity of the victim, but was also aware that any noises he or the victim would make would not be heard by the parents who slept downstairs because of the very loud air conditioner. What's terrifying is the fact that the murderer grabbed the youngest girl's nightgown and used it to strangle Fawn. If the younger sister was in her room that night, she probably would have been the victim. The crime was not fast, and the thug took his time committing heinous acts because he knew that no one was going to hear anything. The thug probably was able to kill Fawn within the first minute because she was asleep. Even if she was not asleep, she would probably not have screamed upon seeing him because, as it later turned out, he was indeed someone the whole family knew. Additionally, the criminal would have naturally gotten spooked by the barking dog, which, by the way, did bark that night, but was assumed to be barking as usual because she was pregnant. This should have further reinforced the investigators' theory that the murderer was familiar with details about the Cox home, including their pregnant dog, who barked often without reason. The next morning, Fawn's father was getting ready for work and using the only working bathroom in the house, which was located on the second floor. However, he did not wake the girls, as it was too early. After he left the house, Fawn's alarm clock went off and kept going and going. Thus, the mother told the youngest daughter to go check on Fawn, but she also followed the little one because she felt that something was wrong. The mother found Fawn blue and stiff, with the nightgown wrapped around her neck. The shattered and shocked mother at first assumed that she had committed suicide and called 911. Investigators went to work right away and did everything right, despite the limited tools and forensic tools available. However, the best thing they did on that day was to collect the fluids left by the criminal. 3 local teenagers who were members of the 9th Street Dog Gang and known for causing trouble in the neighborhood were suspected of the crime and were charged with murder. One of them was even held for 8 months before DNA testing came back inconclusive, and he was released. And eventually, the witness who provided investigators with a statement against the trio recanted the statement, and the charges against the 3 juveniles were dropped. The case went cold, but the Cox family kept looking for evidence and proof. They never gave up. Eventually, in the early 2000s, the Kansas City Police Crime Lab scientists developed a suspect DNA profile from the bodily fluids that were collected and stored in 1989. And soon they uploaded it to the U.S. National Combined DNA Index System database, but found no match. They even recalled the previous juvenile suspects from the 9th Street Dog Gang and took new DNA samples from them. But once again, the results were negative. As technology evolved, the Kansas City Police Forensic Labs finally caught up with the advancements and got their hands on the advanced DNA testing that the Cox's family advocated for, called genealogical DNA testing. The technology was so controversial at the time, the U.S. Supreme Court had to make a ruling to give investigators the green light to use it. Many were simply not certain that it was accurate. However, as it later turned out, the new genealogical DNA testing technology solved many cold cases. The Cox family and the community even raised the money needed to help the police department conduct tests using this new technology. Eventually, the test was conducted in 2020, and mere weeks later, on Wednesday, November 11, 2020, the Kansas police announced that the mysterious death of 16-year-old Fawn Cox had finally been solved. The new advanced DNA tests pointed out that the killer was probably a relative of Fawn Cox. Soon, the conclusive results revealed that her rapist and killer was Donald Cox Jr., her cousin. Donald Cox died in 2006 under suspicious circumstances, which led the crime lab to retain and keep a sample of his blood. The sample was used in 2020 to extract his DNA and use it in the genealogical DNA test. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and ring the bell to get notified every time we upload a new video.